Welcome to Vanguard, a heretical podcast on culture, society, and politics. Here are your hosts, Colin Liddell, Andy Nowicki, and Richard Spencer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vanguard. This is Richard Spencer, and we are recording on Saturday, January 19th, 2013, and this program will be netcast to the world on the following Sunday, January 20th. How time flies. Joining me, as usual, are Andy Nowicki and Colin Liddell. Colin,
Hello.
I'll start with you. How are things over in Tokyo?
Well, it's been a snowy week.
Oh, really? That sounds...
Yep, I've had one of the heaviest snowfalls in several years, and so, things have been looking quite nice here. But now it's starting to melt. All the snow people are dying.
Well, big urban cities, they do become more romantic with snow. When I lived in New York City and there was a nice snow falling, maybe you could walk around Lower Manhattan in the snow. It was quite fun. Quite kind of maybe made it almost sense like you're in a 19th century painting or something.
Yes, everything becomes kind of muffled for a while.
But then it melts and it's completely gross, and the bottoms of your pants legs are...
Well, in Japan, what happens is they have a secret army of old people and housewives, and they get out there in the morning with the shovels, and in a remarkably short time, you can move about quite easily.
Oh, well, that's quite nice.
And an industrious race they are.
Too much time on their hands, obviously, yeah.
And Andy is joining us from Georgia, where I imagine it is not snowing.
It is not snowing, and we're all in the throes of Falcon fever right now. By the time this podcast is broadcast, we'll all know whether the Atlanta Falcons are Super Bowl bound or not. Anyway, a bit of sports, but it's topical right now.
Yes, no, that's good. Well, nothing much is happening out here in the snowy Pacific Northwest. Although we haven't the wild out here in the Wild West. I have a pack of dogs. They're tied up to this a kind of well-like device, and we have them running full time, and they're generating electricity, which I use to run my MacBook Pro and do this podcast. So we'll just keep my wife is out there whipping them, so they'll keep running. That's how life is. We haven't actually had enough snow out here. When skiing wise, I've become kind of a powder snob. I only go out when there's a couple of inches of snow so I can get the powder, because I don't care about the groomed runs anymore. So I'm waiting patiently for a big snowfall. Today we're going to discuss Christianity and the Christian question. And this is, of course, a huge topic that we could spend many, many podcasts on, and many books have been written on. But we're going to focus on contemporary Christianity and the essence of modern Christians, or at least people who call themselves Christian. Do we live in Christian societies? I mean, this is an important question. So we're going to focus really on that. And I think we might get into some deeper matters later, like even like the essence of Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, Jesus Christ and his message and things like this. But today we're going to kind of maybe find a good starting point into this subject, and that is just Christianity in modern times. And also, I guess I'll also mention, we want to treat this subject objectively and have an interesting conversation. I think both Colin and Andy and I would all agree that there is a kind of tendency towards fanatical anti-Christian, harangues, and I basically there's
among the
alt-right, so to speak. So there's probably little that I find less interesting than shrill anti-Christian screaming. So we'll keep that at bay and look at this matter objectively. I actually just wanted to read a quote from a really fascinating book that I've been reading and kind of rereading because it's worth it, and I recommend it to everyone. That it's called The Subversion of Christianity. It's by a great French historian named Jacques Ellul, who's I actually encountered him through his magnificent book Propaganda, and which is also well worth a read. And this is The Subversion of Christianity, and this is literally coming from the first page, and I think it's a very good place to start. And he says, how has it come about that the development of Christianity in the church has given birth to a society, a civilization, a culture that are completely opposite to what we read in the Bible, to what is indisputably the text of the law, the prophets, Jesus, and Paul? He says, there is not just deviation, but radical and essential contradiction, a real subversion. So I just wanted to bring this up. I think we can bring it down a level and just talk, about life in 2013 in America and Europe. But do you think we're living in Christian societies? Certainly in the United States, many people, particularly Republicans, would describe our society as such. But someone like Jacques Ellul, who was a very serious Christian, thinks that we're living in probably the opposite of a Christian society. So I know even that is a huge question. With you can answer many levels to that. But what are some of your first thoughts? And I'll let, since Andy is the Christian among us, I'll be very Christian and give him the first whack at it.
Well, thank you. God bless you. I would say I would echo the commentary of many a conservative Christian thinker in our times, and say this is really in many ways a post-Christian age in the West. Not in other places on the earth, certainly not all over the earth. There are places on our planet where Christianity is a very vibrant cultural force. But in the West, I would say it's past its zenith, and it's an unusual circumstance because it's like the sun is going down, but the rays of the sun still reach us. So we still have some echo of in our manners and in our attitudes and our thoughts, our way of thinking. We still have many remnants of the Orthodox faith that used to be, the standard, used to be the way of thinking that was mainstream, the faith that everyone believed in
Christendom, at least. Where do you think Christianity is still vital and has a vitality to it?
Well, in the third world, many places in the third world, and in Africa, in Asia, because I'm remembering a book that was written not long ago. Yes, there you go. Yes. Do you remember the title? Just for our listeners.
He's written a couple. Let me Google it here just one second. But The Next Christendom.
Yeah, that's right.
But he's written a couple of books on this subject.
And for example, you have in the faith you were raised in, or the denomination you Richard, were raised in, Episcopalianism, which is generally a fairly liberal denomination now in the West. But you have conservative factions, who don't want to live under these liberal bishops who are forcing homosexuality and women priests and other sort of things like that. They bring in, they're trying to bring in these priests and bishops from Africa and from other places in the world that where thinking of things in a more traditional Orthodox Christian way is still fairly common. And so it sets up an unusual kind of cultural clash, because you have the liberals who are all about being inclusive and multicultural and respectful of other traditions and races and nationalities. You have them opposing, the actual ethnics that are being brought in from other societies because they're more Catholic. It's like the conservative groups wanting to make these, more Catholic or more Christian, more traditionally Christian, maybe in some cases Anglo-Catholic, although that's a different subject entirely.
We should reach out to liberals and promote immigration restriction.
Andy, what you're talking about kind of puts me in mind of the Archbishop of York, he's from Uganda. And so, of course, he's part of the Church of England, which is Episcopalian.
He's a conservative in the Church of England.
Well, yeah, because obviously, growing up in a country like Uganda, you don't get too far by advocating gay rights.
Yeah.
So he has
or feminism.
When you translate an African Episcopalian to one of the first world Episcopalian countries like America or England, then immediately these people become hardline conservatives.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of sense where the church wants to preach certain kind of moral ideas, but for all sorts of kind of politically correct reasons, it doesn't feel it has the right or the authority. So they kind of invest in these third world figures because that gives their conservative religious message more authority in a kind of strange way. So, I mean, I find the whole thing completely repulsive in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you're going to be moralistic and old-fashioned and traditional, at least, stand up for your own message. Why do you have to import these kind of, like, magic Negro figures,
Yeah, let me take up that idea. I mean, I remember actually on Christmas Eve we went to an Episcopalian Christmas Eve Mass, my parents and wife and I, and despite the fact that I don't have faith, I've never had this hostility towards a lot of these institutions, and I don't have any hostility towards the Episcopalian Church as liberal or something like that. And I actually liked it quite a bit because they had fairly old-fashioned hymns, and they
did beautiful, right? I imagine.
Yeah, and they had nice. Even this is a very small little church out of Montana, and they still had a very nice chapel, stained glass window with the Holy Family centered at the very center, and you did kind of feel a connection to England. And it also was the antithesis of something that I think probably all three of us agree on, and that is the just truly revolting nature of so much of the kind of gooey evangelical megachurch culture where they're rocking out to Jesus or swaying, or I guess even worse things, or they're going speaking in tongues. But I almost find the megachurch even more disgusting because it's kind of more bourgeois, but stupid songs, everyone's dressed casually, and that Saddleback Church, the guy who's written like the Purpose Driven Life, he comes out in like a Hawaiian shirt, and I mean, I can't express. But anyway,
aesthetically, it's a nightmare.
It is really a nightmare, and it's the worst aspects of our contemporary culture. But I think what I was getting at by going on this digression is that the thing that I still like about the Episcopalian Church is that there seems to be a connection to Europe. There's a connection to a history there, and so much of, let's say, Anglicanism or is about really nationalism in a very broad sense. It's about England establishing itself as a state with independence. It's about one of the great English leaders, establishing a church. And it really is you're being part of being a Protestant is almost being a nationalist and being connected with this long history. And I think it's rather sad when you have these, say, conservative Anglicans who are totally abandoning that. I mean, some of these people were like giving their allegiance to some African leader or things like this, and you're really not, needless to say, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, you're leaving England and you're embracing Africa, and maybe these Africans really don't like lesbians or whatever it is, but is that worth it to really leave your national culture? And I guess also I'm kind of a tolerant person.
Very common pattern, though, this thing. Like when conservatives, when they have a conservative position, they feel they have to have something to kind of counterbalance that. So, for example, now the big debate in America about gun control. Yeah. And one of the ideas that seems to be kind of coming up more and more is that gun control is a bit racist, you see. So they're saying we want to keep our guns because we're such, good, politically correct people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like accepting the premise, and I think this is a point, Richard, that you've made before in an article or two that I remember reading. It's like when so-called conservatives just accept the premise of liberal multiculturalism, that somehow there's something more virtuous about you if you have friends or allies who are not white. It's that kind of thing. It's like throwing it back in their faces and saying, "Oh, you white liberals who call yourselves so tolerant, we're the really tolerant ones because we have a black bishop from Uganda."
Or liberals are the real racist, or liberal fascism. I mean, Glenn Beck and Jonah Goldberg. I mean,
it's basically competitive political correctness, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I think I called it PC judo. Which is another. You take the other guy's power dynamic and you use it to throw. He's running at you and you use his momentum and throw him down. Well, someone corrected me. That's not judo. That's jiu-jitsu or something. I don't know.
If you take it far enough, you both fall over.
Yeah, we could extend that metaphor here. Let me mention this a little, just to kind of change topics a little bit. I found this fascinating survey that was created in 2010, September 2010, so just a little over 2 years ago. It's recent. It was done by the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, and the Pew Research Center does all this kind of stuff all the time, and they're obviously reliable. And anyway, they did a major survey of religious knowledge, and some of these beliefs, some of these questions in the test were, well, maybe shockingly easy. I think I read one of them, and that was which figure inspired the Protestant Reformation. And I can read I'll link to it in the show notes, a PDF of the actual questions. There were which figure is associated with the Jews' exodus from Egypt, and so on and so forth. And they had some other ones on the answer to those questions from Martin Luther and Moses, just for anyone. And they had some other kind of more general questions, like I think one was about Buddhism, but very easy, like not even 101 kind of thing. But so what is interesting about that? So these questions are the kind of things that I think most of us probably learned in lower school or middle school, if not kindergarten, to be honest. Very, very quite simple. I think I took the survey and I missed one. I thought the Jewish Sabbath began on Saturday, but it actually begins on Friday, so I missed that one. Anyway, I got all of the other ones correctly. There are 32 questions. And what's interesting about the survey is that, I could ask, who do you think scored, best on the survey? I think I told you guys before we went on air, but what would have been your guess before I had told you? Which religious group scored most highly on the survey?
Which religious group?
Yeah.
Atheists, I would have said, actually, but probably Protestants would be higher than Catholics, I would have imagined.
Yeah, that's not the case. What the people who scored the best were atheists and agnostics. They actually answered 20 out of 32, or 20.9 out of 32. Jews were right below them at 20.5. Mormons actually scored quite highly. They were right below atheist Jews and agnostic atheist Jews.
Were Muslims included? Because I think they would score pretty high because it's a lot of the same kind of background, isn't it?
Well, they weren't included, but I would imagine they would score quite low. To be honest, they don't know anything.
I don't know. They share a lot of these same reference points with Christianity, and they're much more intense in their religious affiliations. So possibly they might have done quite well, especially because the ones in America are probably more intelligent than the ones back home.
Well, that might be true. And so you had those scored 20. Below that, white evangelical Protestants got 17.6. White Catholics got 16. And then white mainline Protestants actually knew less. than evangelicals. And it seems like there's a class difference between mainline Protestants and evangelicals. They got 15.8. So pretty much they're...
It was like 32 questions with a multiple choice of 3, yeah?
Yes, multiple choice of 3. So they were scoring 50%, more or less.
The random would be 11 or so, yeah?
Yes.
Or 11.
Yes. So basically, also there's a group of nothing in particular that scored a little bit below. And then blacks got 13.4. And Hispanic Catholics came in at 11.6. So essentially, the Hispanic Catholics just beat random. So they know really, literally next to nothing.
Was there some language? Was it possible that there was a language barrier there?
That's true. I don't know if this test was translated. That is a legitimate question. But I would say blacks certainly don't. They don't have any problem with the language.
Yeah, they don't get that excuse.
And 13.
Translated to Ebonics.
Right. So obviously we could just kind of make fun of people all night, but that wouldn't be fun at all. But I think what this is getting at is, even amongst people, if you say white evangelical Protestants, I would say a large majority of those are going to be Republicans. They're the kind of, go America, fuck yeah types. And yet they know they just scored over 50%, failing grade on very, very basic knowledge. So I guess this also just kind of gets us back to this question of, is this a Christian society? Can this be a Christian society if you know next to nothing about the Bible and your religion?
But another point, if you had had the same quiz back in the high point of Christianity in the Middle Ages, you'd have probably got even worse results. That's very true.
Because they couldn't read, right?
Well, not just that, but they weren't really encouraged to know too much about the details. I mean, actually... The interest in all of the myths and the legends behind Christianity is something that really stems from Protestantism, when people were actually encouraged to actively study the Bible rather than just kind of blindly obey.
You were supposed to read the stained glass windows and things like this. You weren't certainly supposed to study
the stained glass windows probably represented a local saint who was a Christianized version of some ancient pagan god.
Yeah. Oh, without question. I've seen actually beautiful, just to go on a little bit of a tangent, I actually went to a very ancient, I guess you could call it a chapel in Germany, in Bavaria, and you had those things that were quite explicit. You had pagan gods, and then you had Adam and Eve and Jesus as a, I believe he might have even been slaying a dragon or something. Maybe it wasn't that cool, but it was close to it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point, Colin. The only thing I would say is that, as we joked about before, less than 50% of the people who took the test got it correctly identified Martin Luther as the inspiration of the Protestant Reformation. But I imagine 100% of them would have gotten Martin Luther King as the inspiration for civil rights. So it's not like these people are total ignorant, there's nothing in their brain, all they do is farm or something, they've got tons of stuff in their brain. They have vast arrays of pop culture trivia, they know who won American Idol in 2004. So it really is an ignorance about Christianity.
Yeah, well, isn't it though? Is it partly because we were also talking about this before the show, but people self-identify as Christian just because that's just the way they want to think about themselves. It's like, I don't go to church. I don't really read the Bible much. I don't really know that much about my supposed faith when you get right down to it. But I still consider myself a Christian because, I don't know, I believe in being nice to people, or I believe in forgiveness. Or whatever. It seems like that's really quite rampant, that way of thinking. The point's been made a lot that we're a lot less churched today, even though America is still significantly more church-going than Europe is.
Well, do you think it's mere Christianity and in a kind of terrible way? It's just, Christianity just means, I forgive someone, and Christianity means I don't steal your stuff.
Be nice. Don't be racist.
Right. Without question. Well, I've noticed this. I remember a friend of mine were talking, and he made this point, and it's really stuck with me. Is that he was talking about this? It was an ex-girlfriend. So, granted, some animosity might have been involved, but that being said, she was a big Vangie, big evangelical Christian, and he was saying that Christianity had really very little effect in her life when it came to the things where you think it would. Like, she slept around all the time. She got drunk. Yeah. However, the one place where it actually had power was with regard to race. So, she was an anti-racist. Like, that was serious. It was like, Jesus told us this. But then, she would go and, oh, yeah, let's break out the condoms because it's Saturday night.
I'm a slut, folks. But at least I'm not racist.
Right. It's a, like, I'm going to have to have an abortion. Don't worry. Jesus will forgive me. But heaven forbid that we, restrict immigration.
It just sounds to me like the essence of Christianity, though.
Yeah.
I think Christianity has always been that kind of religion. It's always made all these kind of like unrealistic demands on people. And that's the essence of Christianity. And so people can never really live Christian lives. So they're always in a state of not really being good Christians and being aware of that. And so feeling like a sense of guilt or unease or the need for moral validation. And that's just a very kind of useful control mechanism if you think about how it's been used historically. And it has its own echo in modern-day political correctness. I mean, modern-day political correctness is exactly that. You're supposed to have all these views on certain things which are basically impossible for any kind of normal, healthy human being to have. And so you're basically being tricked into thinking that there's something wrong with you and that you shouldn't have power and you shouldn't pursue your legitimate ends. You know what I mean? So I think that's, to me, sounds like the essence of Christianity.
Well, but it has changed. I mean, there were plenty of Christians who were inspired to protect their civilization, by Christianity.
Absolutely.
I mean, someone like Charles Martel. I mean, there are also some things that I think most we don't want to ever revisit. I'm thinking of the wars of religion, where 40% of Bohemia slaughtered and all this kind of stuff, and there was certainly some geopolitics at play there, without question. But I think it's also not. I think it's also not wrong to underestimate the fervor, the religious fervor that led people to slaughter one another. I know. Yeah,
but the fervor probably comes from the guilt as well, because like Charles Martel, I'm not sure what his love life was like, but I assume, he had all sorts of, problems about feeling guilty about this and that. And so killing the infidel was the way to sort of cleanse his soul. It's a typical thing with the Crusaders. You were absolved of all your sins when you went on crusade. So there's a kind of dynamic of feeling guilty and trying to redeem yourself, which runs throughout Christianity, and which you can see in this guy's girlfriend you mentioned. She's a complete slut, but she kind of justified herself by her anti-racism.
Yeah, when you first started on this line, I thought it was just too simplistic, but I think what you're getting at is true. I think there is a guilt aspect. I mean, Nietzsche identified guilt as a really fundamental aspect of Christianity, and that's something that is probably at the core of Christianity much more than traditional religion, in the sense of admiring and honoring certain gods. I don't think it used that guilt factor. But do you guys want to pick up on that idea, or?
In those terms, and America is a very Christian society because people find it hard to live good Christian lives, which is the essence of being a Christian.
Well, it makes me think a lot of one of my favorite writers and philosophers, Soren Kierkegaard. That's the kind of point that he kept driving home over and over again, is that people in his day, in which things were in 19th century Denmark, things weren't exactly like they are in early 21st century America, but still there was this. He thought there was this tendency to soften the Christianity, which is obviously a very demanding faith, and demanding certain kind of response and certain types of behavior, and that people just comforted themselves by saying, well, we're all Christian, because that's the society that we have, and we have a Christian king and the Christian government, and blah blah blah. So in some ways it kind of segues into what we've got today, which I think is a much more dire state, because there's been obvious more dire than in Kierkegaard's day and time, because there's a much more obvious moral decline today. But still, it's the same kind of thing. Even to the people who are living together and sleeping around, doing these things that are obvious, that are against the teachings of the faith, and most of them, being sex-related things since the sexual revolution. Most of them would say that they're Christian, would call themselves Christian, and even though they don't go to church, even though they don't live up to the tenets of the faith. So it's that same kind of thing that that for Kierkegaard, it's the contrast between what he calls Christendom and what he calls true Christianity, which I think is still relevant.
No, I think Jacques Ellul was getting at that as well. But don't you think maybe we've almost flipped over to the other side of that? And I'm thinking in particular of the prosperity doctrine Christianity, which is very popular in contemporary America, probably over the past 20 years, and people like Joel Osteen. And actually, I think Joel Osteen can be summed up by the title of his, or let me say this, Joel Osteen's heresy can be summed up by the title of his most famous book, which is Your Best Life Now. And that probably, if you really think about that, theologically speaking, that's the most anti-Christian statement possible. Your best life is not now. But I think if you go beyond that, there's a kind of like I was actually listening to a few of his sermons on YouTube, and I'll link to those in the show notes, so you can go listen. I don't think it's worthwhile playing them here, but some of these themes are in being in favor of you're in his favor, and that means basically the price of your house going up and you're getting promoted at your job. And there's actually this one big famous living in total victory. So God, he didn't make you, I'm almost channeling him. He had big plans for you. He didn't make you with some low down person with no self-esteem. He had God-sized plans for you. He wanted you to have a God-sized life. That is to live in total victory. I didn't say victory. I said total victory. Like on and on like that.
Isn't that simply Calvinism being repackaged?
Well, but it's not, because it's Christianity without guilt. Because, this is why I think...
It's heathenism.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's disrespecting the heathens, of course, but...
I said, hedonism.
Oh, hedonism, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
pleasure-seeking.
But it is, but maybe it's something deeper than that. Because maybe we've almost reached this... And maybe this is an expression of the ultimate decline of Christianity. We've reached this flip side of it, where it's no longer this kind of like, let's say, guilt-mongering type of person of like, well, you're going to hell. That those sins are mortal. Like, come confess to me your sins. And that kind of control mechanism. We've almost reached this new horrible American synthesis of this, where there's no guilt, and it's not operating on guilt. It's operating on patting yourself on the back. You have God-sized plans. He used that phrase. I was thinking super size. It's like, why don't you God-sized?
Richard.
They're like, do you want a Slurpee? Yeah, I want it God-sized. 80 ounces of sugary liquid.
Yeah, but that's really nothing new, I have to say, because that just sounds like, you're going to guilt-monger in Christianity. That's the Catholicism and maybe Episcopalianism to a certain extent, because it kind of roughly follows Catholicism. Yeah. And what you're describing there, it just sounds like the Calvinistic concept of the elect.
Well, but don't you think Calvin, he had a very rigorous morality, and also with Joel Osteen, everyone's elect. I mean,
in modern, Western society, everybody is a precious little snowflake anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everybody is,
right.
part of the elect.
To bring it back to Fight Club for a minute.
Yeah.
A precious little snowflake.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are probably some precedents in things like Calvinism for what we have now, but I do think that what we have now is new. Like Christianity has kind of taken, and maybe for it to survive, it's had to take kind of a new turn, and this turn has, acquiesced with. The kind of
co-opted.
It's acquiesced with the vulgarities of modern American consumerist society.
Well, Joel Osteen is kind of like the Walmart of his church is like the Walmart church.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I saw this. This comes from Charisma Now, a magazine. I'll link to that. But the new church facility has 8 giant video screens, 12 elevators, 3 escalators, 2 waterfalls. It has 2 waterfalls, 241 toilets, because I guess they're in need of that because of a lot of the stuff he's talking about. Parking for 7,000 vehicles. The church has also added a 5-story wing featuring Lakewood's television studio, a classroom for kindergarten. Goes on and on. And I think maybe, it's funny. This brings me back to some of my these friends of my parents who I love dearly. They're very nice people, and they actually had they came from a radical Protestant background. Their parents were literally missionaries. And then, as baby boomers, they became hippies and irreligious types, as they came into age. But I always noticed this about them, that they actually were weirdly becoming exactly like their parents in their kind of hippiedom. And what struck me about this is I remember talking to them about Catholicism, and they were going on and on, like, the Vatican, they have all that art, they need to sell it and give it to the poor. So, all this, there's this iconoclasm and kind of things. And I actually found myself as the great staunch defender of the Catholic Church in this circumstance. Because I thought it was, when I visited St. Peter's and things like that, when I was a younger person, I was, amazed, and you see the height of Italian Renaissance and so forth. But anyway, what I was going back to is that my point being that I think when you look at the Vatican's museum, when you look at their sponsorship of Michelangelo and so on and so forth, I think we really are in awe, and it's kind of, it's almost like it's worth it. They should have sold those indulgences. Like, look at this stuff they have. But I think with someone like Joel Osteen, he is building some horrible Walmart. I mean, it's like there's no redeeming. It's like corruption without any redeeming qualities.
This boils down
the
to
worst of both worlds.
Yeah,
it's a lose-lose.
Yeah.
So, Richard,
instead of a win-win.
It boils down to a matter of taste and aesthetics.
Everything does. Well, I know.
The question is, why is one aesthetic so much superior to another?
Well, do you not think that St. Peter's is superior to?
Oh yeah, obviously. I'm on the side of the angels here,
so to speak. Well, no, I totally agree. I'm just. I guess this gets to another point, which is that maybe Christianity has always acquiesced to power, and that in some ways there was just better forms of power earlier on. And I think a lot of Christians, particularly serious Protestants, have a view of themselves as, we're always under attack. Christianity is kind of this little faith that's the kind of plucky little faith striving, and the powers are all secular and are distrustful of it. And that is, there's certainly many circumstances where that is the case, but there are many other and maybe many more circumstances where it's the opposite effect. I mean, Christianity I'm not sure Christianity would have the kind of civilizational impact it has had if it were not for Constantine, and the connection of Christianity with the Roman Empire, and forming the Orthodox, eventually Byzantium, and the Orthodox Church, and the Western Catholic Church, so on and so forth. And if you look at the great heights of European civilization, whether it was Catholic or Protestant Christianity, it really aligned itself with power. It aligned itself with the aristocratic ruling class. And so maybe what you could say with some of these like really truly vulgar aspects of Christianity is that it's aligning itself with American power. And that's what it often does, because Christianity is a very flexible religion. Mm-hmm. But what do you guys think about that? I mean, I almost have the sense that contemporary Christianity, at least in America, it is kind of Americanism. It's like, yeah, your mortgage is going up. That's because you're in the Lord's favor. You've got a God-sized mortgage now. You're going to be promoted. Oh, you've got some God-sized credit card debts, but I've got some God-sized hope, and
Well, again, I would just invoke the critique of Kierkegaard that I mentioned a few minutes ago with regard to America. It's Christianity. Maybe there's room for flexibility, but as far as acquiescing to power necessarily, yes, I'm sure it has acquiesced to power, and Kierkegaard would say to its own undoing, because then what is rigorous about it, what's really there, the actual doctrines and dogmas of the faith that are rigorous and demanding and difficult gets lost, and the essence of it gets lost. And I would say that that would be my view of what's happening, in our country, and in the larger sense, I guess, all over the West, but in a particularly American form in America, where people are still more likely to call themselves Christians and consider themselves believers and think that there's life after death and all this kind of thing, but still just basically live the way that the zeitgeist tells them that they're supposed to live.
So I detect a difference, an interesting difference, though. I think in the past, Christianity has acquiesced to power, and also it's been a kind of mutual relationship, because power has also acquiesced to Christianity in a sense. Yeah. In America, what you were describing earlier, it sounds like Christianity is acquiescing to culture rather than power. It's sort of picking up on the dominant materialistic, consumeristic culture, and it's sort of packaging itself in those kinds of ways. And so it's not sort of like, you don't see Christianity really sidling up to power in the White House right now. I mean,
but you do.
In what way?
Oh, without question. I mean, first off, in terms of Christianity acquiescing to power, if you look at Joel Osteen's church, and again, I'm using, granted, this is just one guy, and granted, he's immensely popular, but he is just one guy, but I think he really is part of a major trend. And you see in his church, instead of a cross, you have a turning globe behind him. I mean, again, all this anti-Christian kind of aspect. I mean, it's very much a kind of like, we're world power, we're part of it. And and it's not just in the Bush administration. I mean, all these guys. I mean, like Father Richard Newhouse, but also who was that Saddleback guy who wrote The Purpose Driven, like Rick Warren. All these people, they without question acquiesce to power. Barack Obama's the same way. I mean, a lot of Republicans might want to fantasize that like he's anti-Christian or all this kind of stuff, but he's not. I mean, Rick Warren spoke at his inauguration, and he basically said, I thought this was very powerful.
Yeah, but that's association rather than effect, because Christian groups and politicians, they do sort of come together because it's in the nature of what they do. But when it comes down to sort of nitty-gritty changes in the law to favor or suit Christianity, I don't really see that happening to such an extent. Well,
it might be a one-way street. I mean, I agree with you in the sense that I don't think Republicans or anyone in Washington they're ever going to ban abortion. And I think for one of those reasons is they don't want to give up that political football. Because then a lot of people might become Democrats or something if they. So
they can't say vote for us because we'll overturn Roe versus Wade if Roe versus Wade gets overturned.
Exactly.
Then
yeah.
what are they going to say?
So I mean, I think that is true. So I think Christians are being taken for a ride, so to speak, and it's a one-way street. Like they're not going to politicians aren't going to really do anything. But at the same time, I mean, American Christianity I think is intertwined with support for American power. And you can really see it. I mean, and I don't. This is. I'm going back to the Bush years in a way, but I think you can see this all over the place. I mean, the kind of very real and very genuine support for the war, support for the Iraq War and related wars, and Bush that you saw amongst pastors. And I mean, this was a real.
No, that really helped out the Christians in the Middle East, as we all know.
Well, but that's not. No. I think you're absolutely true. I mean, they were slaughtering. This was like the Iraq War was like devastating for Christians in the Middle East. So, obviously, and a lot of these people. But also, you can look at the Christian Zionism. I mean, Kufi. You know, I think you could maybe say that a lot of guys who are like Zionist supporters, who are congressmen, are maybe just like they're getting paid, they're stooges, and so on and so forth. But if you look at like all those people who sign up for Kufi or went to like Glenn Beck's like rally for Israel, in Jerusalem, like they're not getting anything from this money wise or power wise. I mean, they have like an honest belief that America is a Christian nation. Israel, weirdly, is a Christian nation or something. And that it's all kind of wrapped up in some big world historical, movement that they're a part of.
I'm on the mailing list of the ACLJ, the American Christian. It's like the ACLU, except for the right. Arguing for religious liberty and stuff, which is in general something I support. But a letter saying, we've got to oppose Chuck Hagel because he clearly hates Israel, and it was just kind of an example of what you're talking about, like and this is a right wing, like a Christian right kind of person, who was sending out this email, and the war in Iraq you were saying was really bad for Christians living in the Middle East, but of course it was good for Israel, or was seen to be good for Israel.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think this is, and Colin, I think this is a big difference that we can talk about, is that asymmetry between American Christianity and European Christianity. And maybe my sense of it all is that American Christianity is better integrated into American power. And so when people, they're kind of being, when people are being a Christian, it's kind of like being a part of it. You're normal. You have good health. You love your country. You love your this. You want to help out the world, and so it's just kind of being a part of it. And I think maybe because of Europeans have been, and obviously what America is doing with that is mostly horrible in my opinion. But Europeans, in the sense that they've been kind of like the old man of the world, they're no longer going to have a say in geopolitics. It's a kind of aging population. They're kind of always in the shadow of NATO and the United States and the Soviet Union or I guess China now or something, whatever. That they really don't. It's kind of it's an impotent culture, and there's kind of nothing to believe in a way. And so you have a kind of either atheism or kind of just like nothing in particular, kind of I'm a vaguely maybe Christian value, but I don't really believe in anything. And Americans, for better and for worse, probably mostly for worse, they seem to really believe in something, and that is power, and not the faith.
Yeah, in terms of global geopower, Europe is washed up. But Israel's not that important to Europe. I mean, Europe tends to be slightly anti-Israel.
Yeah.
And America's extremely pro-Israel. I don't see where we can go with this, though. Where does this actually lead us to?
Well, I guess maybe if you could say if American power is waning, that this might lead to a crisis of faith.
Yeah, but Christianity's got all the angles covered, hasn't it? Because, when you're doing well, it's because God loves you, and when you're not doing well, it's because God's testing you. So Christianity is quite malleable and good at finding some way to sort of fit the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And that's why it has such a long history, and that's why it's so inconsistent from period to period.
Yeah. Well, actually, why don't we might want to put a bookmark in this discussion, but why don't we just end on that subject? I think I've basically said my piece about where I think Christianity might be headed. But what are your all's ideas about the future of Christianity? I mean, you, Colin, just you brought up at the beginning this idea that Philip Jenkins' idea that Christianity might be shifting to the third world.
That was me, right?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Did I say Colin? Oh, I'm back to my grand tradition of.
Religions generally seem to be much stronger amongst impoverished masses than they are in kind of affluent, materialistic cultures.
Yeah.
And America's a slight exception, but I guess it's not that much of an exception.
And also, there's the idea of will the religious inherit the earth, which is put forward by I'm forgetting his name at the moment, but I'll link to it in the show notes. But it's essentially, if you just think about this eugenically, so to speak. The people of faith are having babies, and secular humanist swipples aren't. And if you really want to think, and I actually agree, I totally believe this, that the faith, not necessarily whichever religion, but faith in general, is something that's highly heritable. That. You can see that in families, even if they convert to a different religion, they do it with the fervor of a convert. My family is pretty secular. We range from the secular to the Nietzschean, and at least I've noticed. Maybe a little bit of religious. We do have some religious sentiment in my family, but it's not as strong as in others. So anyway, if religion is highly heritable, then the religious are going to inherit the earth. They're having more babies.
That's a point I've made before, I think a few times, a drum that I've banged on a few times in stuff that I've written, and just saying that if people are concerned about, people who read alternative right and listen to Vanguard, and who are concerned about the West, the future of the West, the demographic decline of the West, I think it seems to me that the solution to demographic decline is a reinvigoration of faith. I mean, that's easy to say. Of course, how do you bring it about? Where does it go from there? I don't really have a strategy as far as that goes. But it seems to me, like you're saying, that it's the faithful ones who are more likely to predominate in the future, whoever they are, whatever faith they are. And so in that case, if the secularization of the West is certainly something to be viewed as, with some concern, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Colin, do you think we're leading to a greater secular world? That's saying that is such a kind of like conventional wisdom of a lot of sociologists of the 20th century that I almost think it must be wrong.
If you look at the trends over the last 200 years, there's been this massive increase in secularism, especially in the more advanced countries.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with that has come certain demographic problems. And if you look at that in the case of Europe, you can see the Europeans have become sort of too clever for their own good, and they've all become secular, and they've become hedonistic, and they no longer reproduce at the rate of their ancestors. So we've now got the Muslims pouring in and having large families, and then the question remains: will they actually, remain as Muslims, or will they also become secularized? I mean, for a period, the Islamic world was also going through a period of secularization. If you look back at the early 20th century.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Turkey was secularized in the 1920s. The Ba'athist Party in the Middle East, in Iraq and Syria, that represented secularization. So did Nasser in Egypt. So
Iran before before the Ayatollah came to power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So until about the 1980s, the Islamic world was also going through a period of secularization, and now it seems to be going through the opposite. And so I think you'll see a kind of repetition of various tendencies going one way and then going the other.
Yeah.
And,
well, I think in some ways, PC is a substitute religion. I mean, I think you could look at this real, kind of dialectically and see that secularism, quote unquote, has flipped over into its opposite, and it's now a religion.
Yes, and it makes up for its demographic shortcomings by the very essence of its beliefs.
Yeah. Well,
not very convincingly, but maybe makes up for some part of it.
Oh, give it a
not
chance.
Very fulfillingly.
Give it
I have given it a chance and found it wanting.
No. I think actually you said this. I think you might have said this on Twitter or something. You said, "I'm religious but not spiritual." Could I check that box? But that says so much about our society. That's like, I'm spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, I was inverting what everybody always says. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual.
Well, that's being an Episcopalian. Like, that's like the essence of my church is being religious but not spiritual. But being Christian but not humane, maybe. Anyway, but what I was thinking of is maybe give political correctness a chance. It might actually become a full-fledged religion. I mean, we already kind of worship Martin Luther King. Remember, we don't have any presidential holidays. Even Honest Abe doesn't have a day anymore. But we have Martin Luther King Day, and we have President's Day writ large, but it's MLK Day, and we might even have use of incense and ritual, and maybe even a human sacrifice at some advanced stage of political correctness, where we'll bring a racist onto the altar and bleed him or something to Martin, to Saint, to say crucify him indeed to Martin, the Saint Martin in the sky. So just you wait, because the religious instinct won't die.
Maybe the upcoming inauguration the festivity there will usher in this new era.
Well,
it was all on the Martin Luther King holiday. Don't tell you, isn't that?
Oh, I think it is, yeah. But Barack Obama will seem like a conservative reactionary vis-a-vis what's about to come. So, yeah, just you wait. Well, anyway, guys, let's put a bookmark
on that happy note.
We'll put a bookmark in the conversation, and certainly I'm sure we'll return to Christianity later on. But
not literally, but yeah, as a discussion topic.
Maybe not. But anyway, Colin, Andy, thank you, and to our listeners, we'll speak with you again next week.
And the Scripture says we have been made in the image of Almighty God. When God made you, He put a part of Himself into you. One way you could say is you have the DNA of Almighty God. He's your Heavenly Father. You got some of His traits, some of His characteristics. That means in your genes right now are favor, wisdom, strength, talent, and ability. God breathed His life into you. Just like you got your natural DNA from your parents, you got your spiritual DNA from your Heavenly Father. And the good news is the spiritual always overrides the natural. God's DNA will override any negative DNA in your family life.